Terminology is interpretative because I'm a native speaker, so I'm going to interpret all of my observations and findings. I would like to start with articles 345, 347, and 29.1. Articles 345, 347, and 29.1 basically speak about official language or languages of the state, special directive for language, and protection of language, respectively. Now, the 6th schedule to the Constitution of India corroborates this right to preserve one's indigenous culture and social customs. Language is the epitome of culture, hence the right and space to preserve one's language is, by default, an important aspect of the 6th schedule. Now, the 6th schedule to the Constitution of India does not explicitly, in black and white, mention about script for a language. However, by default, it does provide for the establishment of autonomous district councils, granting them a degree of autonomy in administrative, legislative, and judicial matters. Within this framework, ADCs or autonomous district councils could, by powers vested upon them, potentially enact resolutions or policies related to language and script usage within their respective areas. It's important to note that the 6th schedule primarily focuses on granting autonomy to tribal communities and their traditional practices, including language use. I would now like to cite on works done on Karbi language. These are missionary works in Karbi language. They were the first to have done work on Karbi language. Therefore, we have to appreciate whatever amount of work they have done. And the first works that they have done was actually written in Assamese scripts, and gradually they changed it to Roman script. Now, we also have here, it's not just the religious materials that they have actually written, they have also written on Karbi primer, Karbi reader, as well as books on mathematics. I would also like to mention about research works on Karbi language. Now, several linguists and researchers have contributed to the documentation and analysis of the Karbi language. Their work has shed light on the language's unique features, grammar, and phonology. Notable among them, as I've presented here, are Dr. Personal, Dr. Jaibol, Dr. Connor, and Dr. Filipova, whose dissertation on Karbi language provided comprehensive linguistic analysis. I would now like to go to Sardoka Ingti, whose English Micro Dictionary was published in 1904. Now, most of us may not be aware of this, but this is the first phonemic inventory which was given to us by a native speaker. I would like to come to the phoneme, the 8th phoneme sound, that is the ch and the sa sound, that is ch post-alveolar fricative and sa alveolar fricative a little later. This is the Makers, a monograph written by Edward Stack and Sir Charles Lyell, published in 1925. Then G.D. Walker's A Dictionary of the Meeker Language, published in 1925. Then a good number of dictionaries have been published. We have lexicographers, and I would like to mention their name. Esteem Lake, Medorsing Grosser, Khorazim Hanse, Sarkling Taro, and one is in progress, which is being compiled by Sir Sekari So. We also have a good number of translation works already done, and I would like to mention the name of Sarhan Michi Hanse, who is a very good translator, and he had recently translated Rabindranath Tagore's Gitanjali. We also have several volumes of Karbi studies. We have a good number of short story writers, and Karbis are very good in writing poems. Then I would like to also mention about Kachari Alun. Kachari Alun means funerary songs, and in this aspect, I would like to take the name of Kachari Kasang Terompi, who sang, and it was recorded for 32 hours. And the translation work is also in progress right now. I would like to mention the name of Bongbong Terang, Nongkam Terong, Midorsing Fu, and Tunse Timon. I would also like to, which I've forgotten to mention, to write it down here, Baralong Terang, Basa Hindi Katha, Padmashri Rongbong Terang, Padmashri Tunesorinti. Now, their contribution to Karbi language is immense, and we cannot actually forget them for what they have done in history, in grammar, or be it in folk songs, poems, everything. They have contributed a lot. Works done by Karbi Lamed Amai. Besides the annual conference that they have every year, they have always encouraged authors, writers, and in publication of books. But at present, they are actually compiling a Karbi grammar for undergraduate students. Then for Karbi Cultural Society, obviously we are all aware of what they have done, their contribution towards songs, dances, and writings. The Karbi Language Development Board, they are responsible for the preparation of syllabus and curriculum, preparation of textbooks, and they also hold yearly workshops, particularly for Karbi language teachers. I would also like to mention about Karbi medium schools. We have 26 constituencies in Karbi Anglong, so we have a total of 29 Karbi medium schools, which is very less. So all the subjects from classes 1 to 5 are taught in Karbi. So we also have a total of Karbi language teachers for ME and high school. At first they gave me 870, but last night I was told that it might cross 900. And for LP schools, we have 58 Karbi language teachers. And for MIL subject, for classes 9 and 10, this year we have the 5th batch, and for classes 11 and 12, we have the 3rd batch this year. AEC in Karbi is being taught in 8 colleges right now under Digrugarh University, and for this year, it is the 2nd batch. Just when we were thinking that everything was going well, we were actually showered with a thunderclap. And the thunderclap was NYS 2021, which actually included the clause 3.4, and the clause is written as such. The government of Assam shall set up a committee to study the demand for notifying Karbi language as an associate language in the state. The committee will also recommend measures to further strengthen and popularize Karbi language at the national level, including a suitable script in consultation with Karbi Literary Society and other Karbi organizations. Now, according to me, this clause is not at all necessary, and it should not have been included at all. Why? Is because we already have a script which was chosen way back in 1978. This was a resolution taken by Karbi Anglong District Council in 1978. And here it is written like this: the question of adoption of Roman script for Karbi language in Karbi Anglong District, in place of Assamese script which has been in use since 1964, in accordance with official resolution number 1, passed in the 51st session of the District Council, has been widely discussed and scrutinized by many representative organizations, in particular, are by members of the public in general in Karbi Anglong. So it was in 1978 that a suitable script was, so to say, unanimously taken up by the people of Karbi Anglong. So that was a linguistic crossroad for us, because right after August 2021, people started having a second thought. Should it be Devanagari or should it be Roman script? Now, my point is, there can be limitations in Roman script also, there can be limitations in Devanagari script also. But the point is, if the people have already chosen Roman script, why should we retract and go back to 50 years or 100 years? Challenges. Instead of continuing with this issue, we should be focusing on the challenges that we have. So what are these challenges? More work should be done on grammar, and on this I would like to reflect on adjectives, because we have a lot to discuss on the adjectives that we have. Should it be adjectival verbs or should it be simply adjectives? Now, when we talk about script, I would also like to mention about the Assamese script, because the Assamese script do not have the post-alveolar ch sound. They have the alveolar sound, alveolar fricative sound. The Karbi has both the post-alveolar fricative sound ch and the alveolar fricative sound sa. So a word like cho meaning eat, and so mean. So if you were to use the Assamese script, cho will become so. So cho, eat, will become teeth. And a word like chewy, purse, or a container would become sui. And sui means to divert or to deviate. So that doesn't only change the entire morphology of the word, but it also changes the phonology of the sound and the semantics of the word as well. Now in Devanagari script, which I have to really research upon, and I would request all of our people here also to research on this. For Devanagari script, the O, mid-back vowel sound, may not be reflected properly. We have basically 3 O sounds as of now. O as in O as in uso, and O as in chong and chong prior to a nasal coda. So we are not very sure whether the Hindi O sound would reflect in our nasal coda, and in our words like so I'm not sure, that is why I'm using the word may not be reflected properly. It is the same with the usage and articulation of za and ja. So some of us, we have this habit of stylizing our words. Words like choji becomes chozi, junji becomes junzi, junje becomes zunze. 0.0p, and manja becomes manza. So I actually had a personal experience, and I actually shared this during one of the workshops in Karbi and I also, where we were offered tea, and the person who actually offered tea asked us, "Sazunzi mazunze." Sazunzi mazunze, and I was perplexed as to how to respond. But then my friend and I, because we did not want to actually, say anything to her, we just said zunzi. We just said zunzi. But then it is not correct.
It should be what?
It should be ja.
No, sentence.
Sajunji. Sajunji, like.
Instead of that?
Yeah.
Instead of
that, the girl said zunzi. Z sound. So we don't have the z sound. I'm coming to that. So then we have some of us pronouncing the v sound, labiodental fricative, as w. So we don't have the w sound also. For us, it's v. So it is the lower lip and the upper lip that we use. So v becomes w. We don't say w. We say v. It doesn't become bilabial. It is the same with the aspirated p sound, bilabial fricative. So p becomes, for some, f, labiodental fricative. We don't have f. So in Karbi, we don't have z, we don't have w, and we don't have f. These sounds are not there. But if we continue to use these sounds, our original sounds will get lost. So these are the challenges that we have to face, and we have to spread awareness. Orthography is another issue. Many of us are not aware of vowel harmony. Vowel harmony in the sense, E will actually go with U. For example, a word like boil, and sting will actually go with a nominalizer ki. We have several nominalizers like ki, ke, ka. But in it will always go with ki. Ki-u. But when it comes to writing, many of us will write ke-u. So this is linguistically and scientifically incorrect. And if we continue to write ke-u, the original sound will again get lost. Writing sentences like, simple sentence like, nangmen kopila. How are we going to write our sentences? So orthography is another area which is a challenge to us. So nangmen kopilo, should we write each of them in isolation, nangmen kopilo, or should it be nangmen in isolation and kopi agglutinated and lo in isolation, or should it be nangmen and then kopilo agglutinated? Which one are we going to write? Supersegmental properties. Many of us are not even aware of the supersegmental properties, and supersegmental properties can also be known as, or we can refer to it as prosodic features, and these are basically the tonal quality of a particular language, stress, pitch, length, and loudness of the language. So Karbi is basically a tonal language. It's basically a tonal language, and it is an agglutinating language. So it is not only high, low, and mid that we have to look into. We also have to look into other aspects of whether it is breathy, freaky, lex, or whether it is even a lexical tone or a grammatical tone. So lexical tones, we have them more or less, but whether we have grammatical tones, that also is an area where we actually have to look into. The other area which is a challenge is classification and branching. Now, Linda Corner states, while there has never been any doubt that Karbi is a Tibeto-Burman language, the exact phylogenetic status inside Tibeto-Burman has not been possible to determine. So, this classification and branching of Karbi language is another challenge to us. We are under Tibeto-Burman, but for some researchers, or for some linguists, they have actually placed us under Kuki chain. But for Graham Thurgood, he has actually branched us separately. So even the branching, the phylogenetic study is not determined till today. So this is another area that we have to look into. Regional accents or dialectical variations is another area that we have to look into. There was a whole lot of debate regarding Supreme and Anglong, right? For people coming from West Karbi Anglong, we refer to guava as Supreme, but for most of the people here, it might be Menduram. I refer to banana for quite a long time as Lothe. It was only when I came here that I learned that banana is also Kinu, Pinu, or Punu. So these are dialectical variations. So we have to actually understand these aspects of them. And particularly children residing in alternative households as domestic help. That is an area that we really have to work upon, concentrate upon, and I really earnestly appeal to Karbi Anglong Autonomous Council to look into this matter, because we all know about what happened to Sumila Rohamti, a domestic help in Rahat. She was actually burned. And that was an eye-opener for us. So thousands are living in others' homes as domestic help. Thousands, more than 5,000, if I'm not wrong. So this is one area that we have to look into. In one of the houses, when a young girl was asked to speak in Karbi, she actually responded in this manner: Karbi bhakha kogoloi moi beya pao. Karbi bhakha kogoloi moi beya pao. To literally translate it, I don't like to speak in Karbi language. So our language is already Our language is therefore already in a vulnerable state. So if we do not take care of our generations to come, who will? We need more Karbi language teachers. And pardon me if I'm wrong, I'm not very sure about the non-Karbi teaching lessons, non-Karbi teaching lessons to our children in Karbi. Because we have non-Karbi teachers teaching Karbi. So I'm not very sure about it, and pardon me if I'm wrong. And we need more Karbi medium schools. We should speak and write more in our language, that is true. So the point is, change of script should not be the issue of discussion. It is the Karbi who will speak Karbi, and it is the Karbi who will write Karbi. It is also the Karbi who gets to choose which is the script they want for the people and not anybody else. As Ingti during the Constituent Assembly debate iterated, it is the Karbi who can represent the Karbi's interests best. Yes. There are many other issues, so we should concentrate on those challenges and issues. Also, when I stress on Karbi language and on its development, it has nothing to do against any other language. In the words of Lake Esopteram, which he actually published in one of the dailies, Arling Daily, he wrote like this: meaning, to love one's native language or mother tongue doesn't mean hatred or dislike towards others' language. And with this, I conclude. Thank you.
Autonomy, the case for extending the 6th schedule in Manipur. So before we look into why, or rather before we present the case for extending the 6th schedule in Manipur, I think it is important that we look a little bit into the background of the state. So Manipur, as we know, is a small northeastern state in India. It is distinguished by its rich cultural diversity and complex social fabric. Manipur, meaning the land of jewels, is a state which is bounded by Nagaland in the north, Mizoram in the south, Assam in the west, and Burma or Myanmar in the east and the south. Now, geographically, Manipur is divided into the hills and the centrally situated valley. The valley is oval-shaped, 790 meters above sea level, surrounded by hills on all sides. This geographic division is a determining factor in the socio-political and historical development of the land. The population of Manipur may be divided into two major groups: the Meiteis in the valley, who constitute the majority community and account for about 57% of the state's population, but occupy only 10% of the land area. On the other hand, the tribals, comprising of the Nagas and the Kukis, are about 37% of the state's population, but occupy about 85% of the land area in Manipur. However, the 10% land which is occupied by the majority community is the most fertile, well-irrigated and alluvial river valley. As a result, the valley progressively grew more prosperous, opening up an economic gap with the tribes in the hills, thus marking the roots of all complicated problems of disparity and inequity, further widening the already existing hill-valley divide. These tensions, deeply rooted in historical grievances, have led to ongoing autonomy demands, particularly from the hill tribes, and today we will be examining the demand for greater autonomy by the tribals of Manipur in the form of extension of the 6th schedule. So before we move forward, we look into what the 6th schedule is. Due to time constraints and since we have been talking about the 6th schedule, I'm sure we've all come to know by now what it aims to do, and so I will not really go into detail that much. However, the 6th schedule, the Article 244 of the Constitution provides for a 6th schedule which shall apply to the administration of tribal areas in the states of Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura and Mizoram. It establishes autonomous district councils as self-governing institutions in tribal-dominated districts, granting territorial autonomy to the areas under their jurisdiction. As Mr. Wangchuk had rightly said yesterday, the 6th schedule reflects the generosity of the Republic of India in accepting the diversity and different ways of the indigenous people. Now we look into the case of Manipur. The situation in Manipur concerning the 6th schedule and its extension is notably distinct. While the 6th schedule serves as a mechanism for tribal self-governance and applies to tribal states in 9 tribal areas, with specific provisions for 4 northeastern states, which we've mentioned already. In contrast, the hill districts of Manipur were excluded from both the 5th and the 6th schedules, making it the only northeastern state without the benefits of the 6th schedule. Instead, an Act of Parliament named the Manipur Hill Areas District Council Act 1971 was passed, which paved the way for the creation of ADCs in Manipur's hill areas. Now we look into the difference between the EDCs under the 6th schedule and the EDCs in Manipur. So the EDCs under the 6th schedule are empowered by Article 244 of the Constitution, whereas the EDCs in Manipur are empowered by an Act of Parliament. The judicial powers of the EDCs under the 6th schedule allow the EDCs to establish village courts, to adjudicate on matters within their jurisdiction, particularly those related to tribal customs and practices. On the other hand, the EDCs in Manipur do not have judicial powers, and judicial matters are dealt by the state judiciary. The financial autonomy of the EDCs under the 6th schedule can levy, collect revenues, and receive grants from the central government, giving them a substantial degree of financial independence. On the other hand, the financial autonomy of the EDCs in Manipur the EDCs in Manipur have lesser financial autonomy, and they rely primarily on funds allocated by the state government and do not have revenue generating powers. This dependence on the state funding limits their financial independence. With respect to administrative powers, the EDCs under the 6th schedule have control over subjects like agriculture, land management, village administration, etc. On the other hand, the EDCs in Manipur do not whereas with respect to the EDCs in Manipur, key areas such as health, education, infrastructure are still under the control of the state, which limits the EDC's effectiveness in these sectors. Now, with regards to the legislative powers, the EDCs under the 6th schedule have wider legislative powers spanning several matters including land management, forests, inheritance, marriage, etc., whereas the EDCs in Manipur limited to personal matters like marriage, divorce, and social customs. Another point of difference between the EDCs under the 6th schedule and that of Manipur is that there is no, under the 6th schedule, there is no single official such as the Deputy Commissioner who holds overarching authority over district councils. Instead, the councils are empowered with a range of mandatory functions, including executive, legislative, judicial, development, and financial powers. In contrast, the current administrative framework in Manipur offers some protection to tribal communities through Article 371C, but heavily depends on the initiative and political will of the members of the legislative assemblies from the hill areas who represent the hill areas committees. From the outset, the Act had faced significant opposition as was perceived as a threat to the autonomy that these communities had maintained through their traditional systems of self-governance across various aspects of life. As mentioned above, the powers of the EDCs under the 6th schedule are significantly greater than that of the EDCs under the Manipur Hill Areas District Council Act. Thus, it is alleged that no true autonomy is ensured by this Act, and autonomy granted to these councils is often perceived as a limited or ineffective scheme. Now we look at the demand for the 6th schedule in Manipur. So it is not surprising that the tribal communities in Manipur have consistently called for the extension of the 6th schedule to the hill areas. Moreover, the hill areas committee has also been advocating for the